The medical bay of the Galactic Research Station Kepler 442 hummed with the quiet efficiency of alien technology. Dr. Zura Chun, the only human aboard the station, carefully reviewed the morning's patient roster on her tablet. At 26, she had already earned her reputation as one of the finest xenobiologists in known space, though most of her colleagues still treated her like an amusing pet rather than a serious scientist. The Vorthan head researcher, Commander Thexol, approached her workstation with his usual dismissive air. His four arms gestured dramatically as he spoke, his chitinous exoskeleton gleaming under the sterile lights. Human Chun, we have received an interesting specimen. The transport arrived this morning from the Outer Rim territories. Zara looked up from her tablet, noting the slight curl in Thexol's mandibles that indicated either amusement or contempt. With him, it was usually both. What kind of specimen, Commander? A predator from Kalos Prime. The local population claims it has been terrorizing their settlements for months. They managed to capture it, but Thexol paused, his compound eyes glittering. It appears to be dying. Some sort of neurological condition. The locals couldn't determine the cause. The Vorthan's tone carried the unmistakable hint of a challenge. Zara had seen this before. Whenever the station received a particularly difficult case, something the brilliant Vorthan, Zalani, or Keth Mori scientists couldn't solve, they would hand it off to her with barely concealed expectation of failure. It was their way of putting her in her place, reminding her that despite her credentials, she was still just a primitive human playing in the big leagues. I see, Zara said calmly, saving her work. And you like me to examine it? The creature is aggressive. Extremely so, even in its weakened state. It has already injured 2 of our medical technicians. Thexol's mandibles clicked in what she recognized as alien laughter. We thought perhaps your species' famous recklessness might prove useful where proper scientific caution has failed. Zara bit back her initial response. After 2 years on the station, she had learned to pick her battles. I'll need full access to its transport records, capture documentation, and any preliminary scans you've already conducted. Of course. Thexol gestured to one of his subordinates, a young Vorthan named Clixar who had always been more respectful than his superior. Technician Clixar will provide you with all relevant data. The creature is in Isolation Chamber 7. As Thexol clicked away on his 6 legs, Clixar approached with a datapad. His voice was softer than his commander's, almost apologetic. Dr. Chun, I should warn you. This creature, it's unlike anything we've encountered. The capture team described it as death given form. Even the Colossi warriors were terrified of it. Zara took the datapad and began scrolling through the preliminary reports. The creature was designated as Specimen K-7749, a quadrupedal predator roughly the size of an earth tiger, but built like a nightmare. The images showed sleek black fur, overdeveloped musculature, and most disturbing of all, 6 eyes arranged in 2 rows across its elongated skull. Each eye was a deep amber color, almost glowing in the photographs. What are the symptoms of this neurological condition? Zara asked, still studying the data. Clixar's antennae twitched nervously. Seizures, loss of coordination, periods of apparent blindness. The creature appears to be in significant pain. It's been refusing food for 6 standard days now. The Colossi believe it's dying. Zara nodded, mentally cataloging the information. Has anyone attempted direct neural scanning? Commander Thexol ordered a preliminary scan, but the creature's brain activity was chaotic. The readings made no sense. That's when he decided to assign the case to you. Translation: when the Vorthan couldn't figure it out immediately, they dumped it on the human. Zara had to admire their consistency, if nothing else. I'll need access to the station's full medical database, including any records of similar neurological conditions in predator species from that sector, Zara said, already formulating her approach. I've already prepared the access codes, Clixiar replied, surprising her. I also took the liberty of reviewing the local folklore from Kalos Prime. The settlers there have interesting stories about this creature. This caught Zara's attention. Most of the alien scientists on the station dismissed human interest in folklore and cultural context as primitive thinking, but she had learned over the years that local stories often contain kernels of important biological truth. What kind of stories? Clixar's compound eyes seemed to focus on something in the distance. They call it the Shadow Walker. According to local legend, it's not originally from Kalos Prime. The stories say it fell from the stars centuries ago, and that it's been searching for something ever since. Searching for what? Home, Clixar said simply. The stories claim it's been trying to find its way back to the stars, but something keeps it bound to the planet. The seizures, the disorientation, the locals believe it's dying of homesickness. Zara felt a familiar tingle of scientific curiosity mixed with something else. Empathy, perhaps. The idea of a creature trapped far from home, slowly dying of loneliness, struck a chord with her. She knew exactly what that felt like. "I'd like to see the creature now," she said. Clixar led her through the station's winding corridors toward the isolation chambers. As they walked, other researchers paused in their work to watch. Word traveled fast on a station this size, and everyone knew that the human was about to tackle another impossible case. Dr. Veltar, a Zalani physician with crystalline features and an attitude to match, intercepted them near the isolation wing. "Dr. Chun, I feel obligated to warn you that this creature is extraordinarily dangerous. It nearly severed Technician Morek's primary limb during the initial examination." "I appreciate the warning," Zara replied politely. "What sedatives have you tried?" "Standard neurological suppressants, Class A paralytic agents, even emergency surgical anesthesia. Nothing has any effect. The creature's metabolism appears to be completely resistant to our pharmacology." This was interesting. Zara made a mental note to investigate the creature's biochemistry more thoroughly. "What about environmental factors? Have you tried adjusting the chamber's atmosphere, temperature, or lighting?" Veltar's crystalline features shifted in what Zara had learned to recognize as disdain. "Dr. Chun, we are not amateurs. Standard environmental protocols were followed precisely." Standard protocols. Zara had learned that this phrase was often the beginning of the problem rather than the solution. Alien scientists were brilliant, but they approached every situation with the same methodical precision. Sometimes what was needed was a different perspective entirely. They reached Isolation Chamber 7, and Zara peered through the reinforced transparent barrier. The creature lay on its side in the center of the sterile white chamber, its massive form rising and falling with labored breathing. Even through the barrier, she could see the powerful muscles beneath its dark fur, the way its claws reflexively extended and retracted as if it was dreaming of running. But it was the creature's eyes that captured her attention. All six were open, staring at nothing, and they held an expression she recognized immediately. It wasn't just pain or confusion. It was despair. "I need to go in there," Zara said quietly. Veltar and Clixar both stepped back simultaneously. "Dr. Chun, that's extremely inadvisable," Veltar protested. "The creature is still fully conscious and has demonstrated extreme aggression toward anyone who approaches." Zara continued studying the creature through the barrier. Something about its posture, the way it held itself, reminded her of animals she had worked with back on Earth. Sick animals often became aggressive, not because they wanted to hurt anyone, but because they were afraid and in pain. "Has anyone tried simply talking to it?" she asked. The question seemed to confuse both aliens. "Clixarse antenae tweaked." Talking to it? "Dr. Chun, it's a non-sentient predator. It doesn't understand communication." "We don't know that," Zara replied. The neural scans showed chaotic activity, not absent activity. Complex brain patterns often indicate higher intelligence than we initially assume. She was already moving toward the chamber's entry controls when Veltar grabbed her arm with one of his crystalline appendages. "Dr. Chun, I cannot allow you to enter that chamber without proper protective equipment and backup restraint systems." Zara looked down at the alien's hand on her arm, then back up at his angular features. "Dr. Veltar, with all due respect, your proper procedures and restraint systems haven't worked. Maybe it's time to try something different." She gently removed his hand and continued toward the entry controls. Behind her, she heard Clixar activating his communication device, probably calling for backup or reporting her reckless human behavior to Commander Thexol. As Zara entered the decontamination sequence, she reflected on how her colleagues saw her. Reckless, primitive, emotional. They weren't entirely wrong, but they also weren't entirely right. Humans did tend to take risks that other species avoided, but that wasn't always a weakness. Sometimes taking risks led to breakthroughs that careful, methodical approaches missed. The decontamination cycle completed, and the inner door began to cycle open. Through the barrier, she could see Veltar frantically working at a control panel, probably trying to override her entry. She had maybe 60 seconds before he managed to lock her out. Zara stepped into the chamber. The creature's reaction was immediate. All 6 eyes snapped to focus on her, and its massive head rose from the floor. A low growl rumbled from its throat, but it didn't immediately attack. Instead, it seemed to be studying her with the same intensity that she was studying it. "Hello there," Zara said softly, staying near the door but not retreating. "I know you're scared and hurting. I'm here to help." The creature's growl deepened, and its lips pulled back to reveal teeth that could easily tear through her environmental suit. But still, it didn't move from its position. Zara slowly lowered herself to a crouch, making herself smaller and less threatening. It was a technique she had learned working with frightened animals on Earth, and she hoped it might translate to alien predators as well. "I know what it's like to be far from home," she continued, keeping her voice low and steady. "I know what it's like when everyone around you speaks a different language, follows different rules, sees the world in a completely different way." One of the creature's ears twitched forward slightly. "The difference is, I chose to be here. You didn't, did you? You're stuck here, and you can't find your way back." The growling stopped. Zara felt her heart rate increase, but she forced herself to remain calm. Behind her, she could hear Veltar shouting something about emergency protocols, but she blocked it out. Right now, her entire focus was on the creature in front of her. "The others think you're just a simple predator, but you're not, are you? You're intelligent. You understand more than they think." The creature slowly pushed itself up into a sitting position. Its 6 eyes remained fixed on her, but the aggressive tension in its posture had lessened slightly. "Those seizures, the disorientation, it's not just a disease, is it? It's something else. Something they don't understand because they're not looking at the right thing." Zara began to move slowly closer, still in her crouch. The creature watched, but didn't retreat. "They're looking at your symptoms and trying to treat the physical manifestations. But what if the problem isn't physical at all? What if it's something deeper?" She was now close enough to see the individual whiskers on the creature's muzzle, close enough to smell its alien scent. It smelled like ozone and something that reminded her strangely of cinnamon. "What if you're not dying of a disease?" Zara whispered. "What if you're dying of loneliness?" The creature made a sound she hadn't heard before. Not a growl or a roar, but something softer, almost like a whimper. And in that moment, Zara knew she was right. The security alarm that had been blaring in the background suddenly cut off, leaving an eerie silence in the isolation chamber. Zara could hear her own breathing inside her environmental suit, and the creature's much deeper rhythmic breathing just a few feet away. Through the observation barrier, she glimpsed several alien faces pressed against the transparent wall, watching with a mixture of fascination and horror. The creature hadn't moved from its sitting position, but its 6 amber eyes remained locked on hers. There was an intelligence there that made Zara's scientific mind race with possibilities. She had worked with Earth's most intelligent animals, dolphins, elephants, great apes, and she recognized that look. This wasn't just an animal responding to stimuli. This was a conscious being trying to communicate. "Dr. Chun," Veltar's voice crackled through the chamber's communication system. "You need to exit the chamber immediately. Commander Thexol has authorized emergency extraction protocols." Zara ignored the voice and slowly extended her hand toward the creature, palm up and open. "I'm not going anywhere," she said, speaking both to the creature and to her colleagues watching from outside. "Not until I figure out what's wrong." The creature leaned forward slightly, its nostrils flaring as it caught her scent. For a moment, Zara wondered what she smelled like to an alien predator. Fear? Determination? Something else entirely? Then, to her amazement, the creature slowly extended its massive head toward her outstretched hand. The first touch was tentative, just the creature's cold, wet nose brushing against her gloved palm. But when Zara didn't pull away, the creature pressed forward more confidently, allowing her to feel the texture of its fur through her suit's tactile sensors. "Incredible," she breathed. The fur was softer than it appeared, with an almost metallic quality that suggested it might have evolved to deflect energy weapons or radiation. Another piece of the puzzle. Behind her, she could hear excited chatter from her colleagues, but she filtered it out. Right now, nothing existed except her and this remarkable creature. "You're not from Kalos Prime originally, are you?" she asked softly, running her hand along the creature's neck. The folklore was right. You did fall from the stars. The creature's response was immediate and heartbreaking. It pressed its head more firmly against her hand and let out a low, mournful sound that vibrated through the chamber floor. Even without sharing a language, the emotion was unmistakable. Grief, homesickness, longing. Zara felt tears forming in her eyes. She had been right about the loneliness, but the reality was even worse than she had imagined. This wasn't just a displaced animal. It was a refugee. Somehow, this creature had been stranded on Kalos Prime, possibly for decades or even centuries, with no way to return to wherever it had come from. "The seizures," she said, thinking aloud. "They're not neurological at all, are they? They're psychosomatic. You're literally making yourself sick with grief." The creature pulled back slightly and fixed all 6 eyes on her face. For a moment, Zara felt as if it was looking directly into her soul. Then it did something that made her gasp. It nodded. The gesture was subtle, but unmistakable. The creature had understood her words and was confirming her theory. "Did you see that?" she called out to her colleagues. "It understands me. It's responding to verbal communication with complex concepts." Through the communication system, she heard Commander Thexol's voice, sharp with disbelief. "Dr. Chun, you're anthropomorphizing the creature's responses. Predators do not possess linguistic comprehension." Zara turned to face the observation window, her hand still resting on the creature's head. "Commander, with respect, how do you explain a creature that can understand abstract concepts like homesickness and respond with appropriate emotional and physical cues?" "Coincidence and projection," Thexol replied curtly. "You're seeing what you want to see." "Then let me prove it," Zara said, turning back to the creature. "Can you show them what I mean?" The creature tilted its head slightly, considering. Then, moving slowly and deliberately, it stood and walked to the center of the chamber. It sat down again and began a specific sequence of movements. First, it looked up at the ceiling, its 6 eyes tracking something invisible overhead. Then it lowered its head to the floor and pawed at the ground with its front claws, scratching marks in the metal flooring. Finally, it looked back up and let out a series of vocalizations. Not growls or roars, but something that sounded almost like a song. The watching scientists fell silent. "It's showing us a star pattern." Clixar's voice came through the communication system, filled with awe. "Those claw marks on the floor, they're not random. They're arranged like a constellation." Zara felt her heart skip a beat. "Can you identify which constellation?" There was a pause as Clixar presumably ran the pattern through the station's astronomical database. When his voice returned, it was barely above a whisper. It's the Cygnus system, approximately 47 light-years from Kalos Prime." The implications hit Zara like a physical blow. This creature wasn't just intelligent. It was astronomically literate. It knew exactly where it had come from and how far it was from home. The psychological impact of that knowledge would be devastating for any conscious being. "Commander," Zara said, her voice filled with new urgency, "we need to run a full biometric analysis on this creature. I think we're dealing with more than just an animal here." Dr. Chun, please exit the chamber so we can discuss this properly, Thexol commanded, but his tone had lost some of its dismissive certainty. No, sarà riplay firmly. This creature has been alone and misunderstood for who knows how long. I'm not leaving it again until we figure out how to help. She turned back to the creature, which had been watching the exchange with obvious interest. How long have you been on Kalos Prime? She asked. The creature considered for a moment, then began pawing at the floor again. This time, it scratched a series of parallel lines, grouping them in sets. Zara counted carefully. Clixar, are you getting this? Yes, Dr. Chun. If I'm interpreting correctly, it's indicating approximately 230 standard years. 2 centuries. Zara felt sick thinking about it. This creature had been stranded on an alien world for longer than most species' entire lifespans, slowly dying of isolation and despair. You've been calling out to the stars all this time, haven't you? She said. Those vocalizations, they're not random sounds. They're attempts to communicate with your own kind. The creature's response was immediate. It threw back its head and let out the haunting call again, but this time Zara heard it differently. It wasn't aggression or territorial marking. It was a distress beacon, a plea for rescue that had gone unanswered for over 200 years. The seizures started recently, didn't they? Zara continued, pieces falling into place. You're giving up. After all this time, you're finally losing hope. The creature looked at her with such profound sadness that Zara had to blink back tears. Then it moved closer and very gently rested its massive head against her shoulder. Through the communication system, she could hear heated discussions among her colleagues. Words like unprecedented and impossible were being thrown around. But Zara focused on the creature pressed against her, feeling its warm breath through her suit. I'm going to help you, she whispered. I don't know how yet, but I'm going to find a way to get you home. The creature pulled back and looked at her with something that might have been hope flickering in its amber eyes. Dr. Chun, Commander Thexol's voice interrupted, but this time it carried a different tone. Please exit the chamber. We need to reassess this entire situation. Zara looked at the creature one more time. I'll be back, she promised. This isn't goodbye. As she moved toward the chamber exit, the creature made a soft sound, not distressed, but acknowledging. It understood that she would return. Stepping through the decontamination cycle, Zara found herself facing a group of very confused and somewhat awed alien scientists. Commander Thexol's compound eyes were rapidly shifting colors, which she had learned indicated deep thought or stress. Dr. Chun, he said carefully, what exactly do you think we're dealing with here? Zara pulled off her environmental suit's helmet, running her hands through her hair. I think we're dealing with a castaway, Commander. A refugee from another star system who crash-landed on Kalos Prime centuries ago and has been trying to get home ever since. That would make it the first confirmed case of interstellar travel by non-spacefaring species, Veltar said, his crystalline features shifting with excitement despite his earlier skepticism. No, sarà corrective. It would make it the first confirmed case of a spacefaring species that we mistook for a non-sentient animal. The distinction sent a chill through the assembled scientists. If Zara was right, it meant they had been treating intelligent being like a laboratory specimen. We need to run every diagnostic we have, Zara continued. Neurological patterns, genetic analysis, behavioral assessment, communication protocols. Everything. And if your theory is correct? Thexol asked. Zara looked back through the observation window at the creature, which was now lying down, but still watching their group with obvious interest. If I'm right, then we have a moral obligation to do everything in our power to help it get home. The next 72 hours transformed Research Station Kepler 442 into a hive of unprecedented activity. Word of the discovery had spread throughout the galactic scientific community, and researchers from a dozen different species were requesting permission to observe or participate in the investigation. Commander Thexol had declared the creature, now designated as Subject K, 7749, probable sentient, to be under strict research protocols. Zara hadn't left the medical bay except to sleep, and, even then, only for a few hours at a time. She had established a regular schedule of visits with the creature, whom she had privately begun calling Echo, after the way its distress calls seemed to bounce uselessly off the walls of its confinement. The preliminary test results had been staggering. The creature's neural activity patterns were far more complex than any non-spacefaring species on record. Its brain structure included specialized regions that didn't exist in typical predators, areas that appeared to be designed for spatial reasoning, mathematical calculation, and abstract thought. Dr. Veltar approached Zara's workstation, where she was analyzing the latest genetic sequencing results. His crystalline features seemed more animated than usual, which for a Zalani meant he was extremely excited. "Dr. Chun, you need to see this," he said, transferring data to her screen. "The genetic analysis has revealed something extraordinary." Zara looked at the data and felt her breath catch. The creature's DNA contained sequences that didn't match anything in the known biological databases, but they did match something else. Trace elements found in meteoric debris from the Outer Rim territories. "This is incredible," she murmured, scrolling through the analysis. "It's like its species evolved in zero gravity or on a planet with completely different atmospheric conditions." "There's more," Veltar continued. "Look at the cellular structure analysis. The microscopic images showed cells with unusual organelles that seemed designed to process exotic energy sources." Zara had seen similar structures before, but only in extremophile organisms that lived near stellar nurseries or in the radiation-heavy environments around pulsar stars. "Its species evolved in space," Zara said, the implications hitting her. "Not on a planet at all, but in the void between stars." "A nomadic species," Veltar agreed. "Possibly one that traveled between star systems as a natural part of their life cycle. This changed everything. If echo species were natural space travelers, then being trapped on a planetary surface would be like confining a dolphin to a desert. The psychological and physiological stress would be enormous." "Dr. Chun." Clixar's voice came through the communication system. "The subject is exhibiting unusual behavior. You might want to see this." Zara rushed to the observation window and immediately saw what had concerned the technician. Echo was standing in the center of the chamber, but its posture was different. More alert, more focused. All 6 eyes were fixed on the chamber ceiling, tracking something invisible. "What is it looking at?" Zara asked. "Unknown," Clixar replied. "But its neural activity has increased dramatically in the last few minutes. Something has changed." Zara was about to enter the chamber when Commander Thexol arrived with a group of senior researchers she didn't recognize. Their insignia marked them as representatives from the Galactic Scientific Consortium, the highest authority in interspecies research. "Dr. Chun," Thexol said formally, "these are consortium representatives Morthak, Zilandra, and Keenweiss. They've come to observe your work with the subject." The 3 aliens, a Vorthin, a Zalani, and a species Zura didn't immediately recognize, looked at her with expressions ranging from skepticism to mild interest. She had dealt with consortium officials before, and they rarely brought good news. "Dr. Chun," the Vorthin Morthak spoke with the practiced authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "We've reviewed your preliminary findings. While intriguing, we have concerns about the emotional attachment you appear to have developed to the subject." Zara felt a familiar flash of irritation. "Representative Morthak, my emotional state has no bearing on the scientific validity of the data we've collected." Nevertheless, the Zalani, Zilendra, interjected, "The consortium requires that all research involving potentially sentient subject be conducted under strict objectivity protocols. We'll be assigning additional researchers to ensure proper scientific distance is maintained." The third representative, whose species Zara still couldn't identify, remained silent but was studying her with unsettling intensity. "With respect, representatives," Zara said carefully, "this creature has been traumatized by decades of isolation. Establishing trust and communication requires exactly the kind of emotional connection you're trying to prevent. Dr. Chun, Morthax said condescendingly, your species' tendency toward emotional attachment is well documented. However, proper scientific methodology requires. He was interrupted by a sound none of them had heard before. Echo was vocalizing, but not the mournful calls or distress sound Zara had become accustomed to. This was something different, something that sounded almost like, "Is that language?" Zilandra asked, her crystalline features shifting with surprise. Through the observation window, they could see Echo moving around the chamber in a specific pattern while continuing its vocalizations. The sounds were complex, with distinct tonal variations and rhythmic structures that suggested deliberate communication. "It's trying to tell us something," Zara said, already moving toward the chamber entrance. "I need to get in there." "Absolutely not," Morthax commanded. "Until we understand what's causing this behavioral change, no one enters that chamber." But Zara was already in the decontamination cycle. She had learned to read Echo's moods and body language, and something about its current behavior suggested urgency, not aggression. As the inner door cycled open, Echo immediately approached her, its vocalizations becoming more excited. It nudged her gently toward the center of the chamber, then began the same pattern of movements it had been performing before. "It's showing me something," Zara called out to the observers. "The movements aren't random. They're following a specific trajectory." Echo paused in its demonstration and looked directly at Zara. Then it did something that made her heart race. It reached up with one massive paw and very gently touched the side of her helmet. The touch was so careful, so deliberate, that Zara realized Echo had been observing her just as closely as she had been observing it. The creature understood that she was different from the others, that she was the one who had shown it kindness and respect. "Dr. Chun," Commander Thexol's voice crackled through her suit's communication system. "The station's long-range sensors are detecting an anomalous energy signature approaching from the outer system. Unknown configuration, traveling at significant sublight velocity." Zara felt Echo's entire body go rigid against her. The creature's 6 eyes all turned toward the ceiling, and it began vocalizing again, but this time the sounds were different. Hopeful, excited. "Echo," she whispered. "Do you know what's coming?" The creature looked at her with unmistakable joy in its amber eyes. Then it threw back its head and let out a call that was unlike anything it had produced before. It was loud, complex, and filled with such emotion that Zara felt tears forming in her eyes. It was a greeting call. "Dr. Chun, you need to exit the chamber immediately." Morthax's voice came through the communication system, sharp with authority. Unknown contacts could represent a significant threat, but Zara understood what was happening. Echo's species hadn't abandoned it. They had been searching, probably for the entire 2 centuries it had been stranded on Kalos Prime. And now somehow they had found it. "Commander Thexol," she said, her voice filled with growing excitement. "That energy signature, can you determine its origin point?" There was a pause as Thexol consulted with his sensor technicians. When his voice returned, it carried a note of amazement. "Dr. Chun, the trajectory traces back to the Cygnus system, specifically to the same star pattern the subject indicated earlier. Echo's rescue had arrived. But as Zara looked at the joy on the creature's face, she also felt a growing concern. Echo had been away from its people for over 200 years. How would they react to finding their lost family member in an alien research station, surrounded by the very species that had been studying it like a laboratory animal? "Representatives," she called out to the consortium officials, "we need to prepare a first contact protocol immediately. And we need to make it very clear that we haven't harmed Echo, the subject. We need to show them that we've been trying to help." Through the observation window, she could see the alien officials consulting frantically with each other. First contact with a previously unknown spacefaring species was the kind of event that could make or break careers, start or end wars. Echo pressed closer to Zara, its massive head resting against her shoulder. She could feel the creature's excitement and gratitude through the physical contact, but she could also sense something else. Fear. Echo was afraid that its people wouldn't understand what had happened, that they might see the research station as a threat rather than as the place where their lost family member had finally found help. "Don't worry," Zara whispered. "I'll make sure they understand. I'll make sure they know that you're safe." But even as she said the words, Zara wondered if she would be able to keep that promise. First contact situations were notoriously unpredictable, and Echo's people were about to discover that one of their own had been captive on an alien station for who knows how long. The approaching ship could bring rescue and reunion, or it could bring something much more dangerous. The bridge of Research Station Kepler 442 had been transformed into a first contact command center. Representatives from every major galactic species were present either in person or through holographic projection, and the tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a molecular blade. The approaching vessel had been broadcasting on frequencies that matched none of their databases, and its technology appeared to be unlike anything previously encountered. Zara stood near the main view screen, still wearing her environmental suit from her time with Echo. She had refused to leave the creature's side until absolutely necessary, and even now she kept one eye on the smaller screen showing the isolation chamber, where Echo waited with obvious anticipation. "Contact established," announced Lieutenant Kexera, the station's communications officer. "The approaching vessel is responding to our standard greeting protocols." Commander Thexol stepped forward, his four arms working frantically at different control interfaces. "Put it through." The main screen flickered, then resolved into an image that made everyone present catch their breath. The being on the screen was clearly related to Echo, but where Echo was clearly young and sleek, this individual bore the markings of age and authority. 6 golden eyes regarded them with intelligence that was both alien and unmistakably aware. When it spoke, the sounds were similar to Echo's vocalizations, but more complex, layered with harmonics that suggested advanced vocal capabilities. "Translation matrix is working," Kexera reported. "Preliminary linguistic analysis suggests highly sophisticated grammar structures." The being on the screen continued speaking, and after a moment, the universal translator began providing a rough interpretation. "We seek family member lost among the small light places. Have you knowledge?" Representative Morthak stepped forward, his diplomatic training evident in his measured response. "We greet you, travelers from distant stars. We have indeed encountered one of your people. It has been under our protection." Zara winced at the euphemism. Echo hadn't been under protection. It had been a research subject until 12 hours ago. The response from Echo's relative was immediate and intense. The being's vocalizations became more rapid, more urgent, and all 6 eyes seemed to blaze with emotion. The translator struggled to keep up, where condition, harm, explained immediately. "Dr. Chun," Commander Thexel said quietly, "perhaps you should speak with them. You've had the most direct contact with their family member." Zara stepped forward, feeling the weight of dozens of alien gazes upon her. "I'm Dr. Zarachen. I've been caring for your family member. They're healthy and unharmed." The being on the screen focused all 6 eyes on her with startling intensity. When it spoke again, the translator provided, "You are the small speaker who touched minds with our lost child. We have heard the song memories through the star paths." Song memories? Zara felt a chill of realization. Echo species might be telepathic or have some form of long-range communication that the station's sensors couldn't detect. "Your lost child has been lonely," Zara said carefully. "They've been calling to you for many years. We didn't understand at first that they were intelligent. We thought they were just an animal." The silence that followed was profound and terrifying. The being's expression shifted to something that might have been anger or grief or both. "Our lost child was treated as a lesser being." The translator's interpretation carried unmistakable emotion. Zara felt the eyes of every consortium representative on her. She knew that her next words could determine whether this first contact ended in friendship or war. "Yes," she said simply. "And that was wrong. We were wrong. But when we realized the truth, we began trying to help." Your lost child is suffering from isolation, from being separated from their people for so long. The being on the screen was quiet for a long moment. Then it made sounds that seemed different, softer. The translator provided, "You speak with honesty pain. This is noted. We wish to see our lost child immediately." Of course, Commander Thexel interjected. "We can arrange." No, the being interrupted, and this time there was no mistaking the authority in its voice. "The small speaker will bring our lost child. Only the small speaker. Others have caused harm through ignorance. We trust only the one who offered kindness." The consortium representatives erupted in protests. This violated every first contact protocol in existence. Zara was a junior researcher, not a trained diplomat. The security risks were enormous. But Zara was already nodding. "I'll bring them to you." Dr. Chun, Representative Morthak, said sharply, "You don't have the authority to make that decision." "Actually," Zara replied, turning to face the assembled officials, "I think I do. Echo, their lost child, has been traumatized enough. If they trust me, and their people trust me, then disrupting that trust to follow protocol seems counterproductive." The being on the screen made more sounds, and the translator provided, "The small speaker understands wisdom of healing. We will send a cloud swimmer to collect our lost child and the small speaker. Approach time, 1 small day cycle." The screen went dark, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. "This is highly irregular," Morthak said finally. "Dr. Chun," Commander Thexol added, "you realize you'll be completely alone on an alien vessel with a species we know nothing about?" Zara smiled. "Commander, I've been alone with alien species for the last 2 years. At least these ones seem to actually like me." 18 hours later, Zara stood with Echo in the station's main docking bay. The creature had been almost vibrating with excitement since learning about the approaching rescue vessel. Its health had improved dramatically overnight, as if the mere knowledge that its people were coming had been better medicine than anything the station's medical bay could provide. The approaching ship was unlike anything in Zara's experience. Rather than the angular, geometric designs favored by most spacefaring species, this vessel looked almost organic. It flowed and undulated through space like a living creature, its hull seeming to shift and change as they watched. "It's beautiful," Zara murmured. Echo made a sound of agreement, pressing against her side as they waited for the docking procedures to complete. The airlock cycled open with a soft hiss, and 3 of Echo's people emerged. They were larger than Echo, clearly adults, and they moved with a grace that suggested they were perfectly comfortable in multiple types of gravity. The reunion between Echo and its family was the most beautiful thing Zara had ever witnessed. The vocalizations they made were complex beyond the universal translator's ability to interpret, but the emotion was clear in every sound. Joy, relief, love, and underneath it all, a profound sadness for the lost years. After several minutes of reunion, the apparent leader of the group approached Zara. It was the same individual they had spoken with on the view screen, and up close, Zara could see that its 6 eyes held depths of intelligence and emotion that rivaled any species she had encountered. "Small speaker Zara Chun," it said, the translator rendering its words with careful formality. "You have given our lost child kindness when others gave only cold study. This creates debt bond between our peoples." "There's no debt," Zara replied. "I just did what anyone should do when they encounter someone who needs help." The being's 6 eyes all focused on her with renewed intensity. "You believe this. Your truthfulness is felt in the song currents. But others of your station place did not offer such help. Why did you act differently?" Zara considered the question carefully. Around her, Echo was still celebrating with its family, their vocalizations creating a harmony that was both alien and strangely familiar. "Because I know what it's like to be alone," she said finally. "I know what it feels like to be surrounded by people who see you as different, who don't quite understand you." Echo was dying of loneliness, and I couldn't let that happen. The being made soft sounds that didn't require translation. When it spoke again, its words carried a weight of significance that made Zara pay careful attention. "Small speaker Zara Chun, Our lost child has sung your kindness across the star paths. Our people know of you. We offer choice gift. Come with us to see the places between stars where our people swim. Learn our ways as we learn yours. Build bridge paths between our species. Zara felt her heart skip a beat. They were offering her something unprecedented. The chance to be the first human to see their civilization, to live among a truly alien people and learn their ways. But she was also aware of the larger implications. This decision would affect not just her, but potentially the relationship between humanity and an entire new species. She began, then stopped. Echo had approached during the conversation and was looking at her with those 6 amber eyes. In them, she saw something that made her decision easy. Hope. Echo wanted her to come. After everything they had been through together, the creature, no, the person, trusted her enough to want her as part of their life. I would be honored to accept, Zara said. The leader made sounds of approval, then turned to address the other members of the group. Their discussion was rapid and complex, involving harmonics that the translator couldn't begin to interpret. Finally, the leader turned back to Zara. There is one requirement. The other beings of your station place must understand. Our people are not subjects for study. We are travelers, free to move between star places as we choose. This truth must be honored. I'll make sure they understand, Zara promised. As they prepared to board the alien vessel, Echo approached her one more time. The creature, the person, gently touched the side of her head with one massive paw, then made a soft vocalization that needed no translation. Thank you, Zara smiled, feeling tears forming in her eyes. Thank you too, Echo, for trusting me, for teaching me that intelligence and consciousness come in forms we never expect. As they boarded the ship together, Zara realized that her life was about to change in ways she couldn't even imagine. She was leaving behind everything familiar to venture into the unknown with a species that navigated between stars as naturally as Earth's whales navigated the oceans. But for the first time since arriving at the research station, she didn't feel alone. 6 months later, Zara floated in the observation chamber of the star whale harmony of deep currents, watching the cosmic ballet of a stellar nursery through crystalline walls that seemed to bend space itself. The ship, though calling it a ship felt inadequate, was more like a living organism that had learned to swim between stars. Its hull pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that served as both communication and navigation, and its interior spaces flowed and shifted based on the needs of its inhabitants. She had learned so much in her time with Echo's people, the Veltar. They were indeed natural space travelers, evolved from creatures that had once lived in the upper atmospheres of gas giants before learning to break free of gravity entirely. Their ships weren't built. They were grown, cultivated from a symbiotic relationship with organisms that could metabolize stellar radiation and convert it into both energy and propulsion. Echo, whose real name was something like Song That Echoes Between Silent Stars, had made a full recovery from the psychological trauma of its isolation. The reunion with its people and the return to its natural environment had worked better than any medicine the research station could have provided. Zara friend, Echo's mental voice touched her consciousness, still a wonder even after months of practice. The Veltar's primary form of communication was telepathic, though they could vocalize when needed. The speakers for many wished to share new knowledge with you. Zara turned from the observation wall to find Echo approaching, its 6 eyes bright with excitement. It had grown during their journey, its adolescent frame filling out into the powerful build of a young adult. More importantly, the sadness that had haunted its expression during their first meeting was completely gone. What kind of new knowledge? Zara asked, both aloud and through the mental link she had learned to maintain with her friend. Human ship approaches the harmony of many, Echo replied, referring to the Veltar's mobile city ship that served as the heart of their civilization. Your people have sent messages of formal greeting and wish for understanding. Zara felt her heart rate increase. This was what she had been working toward for months, facilitating proper first contact between humanity and the Veltar. Her detailed reports, transmitted back to Earth through quantum entanglement communicators, had apparently convinced the human authorities that these beings represented a valuable potential alliance. Have the speakers decided how to respond? Zara asked. Echo's mental voice carried notes of amusement. They wish to speak with you first. You are the bridge builder between our peoples. Your words carry weight of truth in their considerations. Together, they made their way through the flowing corridors of the ship toward the central chamber where the Veltar elders gathered. Zara had learned that the Veltar didn't have formal government structures as humans understood them. Instead, they operated through a complex system of consensus building led by individuals who had demonstrated wisdom and empathy over decades or even centuries of life. The central chamber was a sphere of living crystal that hung suspended in the heart of the ship. Inside, 7 of the eldest Veltar floated in a perfect circle, their minds linked in the deep communion that they used for important decisions. Speaker of Distant Harmonies Asterisk, the elder who had originally come to rescue Echo, acknowledged Zara's presence with a warm mental greeting. Bridge Builder Zara, your people approach with songs of greeting and offers of knowledge sharing. We would hear your wisdom before we respond. Zara took a moment to center herself. The responsibility of speaking for her entire species was overwhelming, but she had learned that the Veltar valued honesty above all else. Honored speakers, she began, using the formal mental address she had been taught. Humanity is curious about the universe around us. We explore because we want to understand, to learn, to grow. But we're also very young as a spacefaring species, and we sometimes make mistakes. She felt the subtle shift in the elders' mental harmonies as they considered her words. The way we treated Echo at the research station was one of those mistakes. We saw a creature we didn't understand and approached it with scientific detachment rather than empathy. But humans are capable of learning from their errors. Speaker of Deep Currents Asterisk, an ancient Veltar whose thoughts carried the weight of centuries, projected a question. What assurance can you offer that your people will not repeat such mistakes with our kind? Zara had been expecting this question, and she had an answer ready. Because I will be there to help them understand. The Veltar and humanity are different in many ways, but we share important values. The importance of family, the drive to explore and learn, the desire to help those who are lost or hurt. She paused, then added what she hoped would be the deciding factor. Echo taught me that intelligence and consciousness can take forms we never expect. That lesson has changed how humans approach xenobiology research. Your people's experience has made my species better, more careful, more respectful. The elders' mental conference continued for several minutes, their thoughts too rapid and complex for Zara to follow completely. Finally, Speaker of Distant Harmonies addressed her again. Bridge Builder Zara, we have decided to welcome your people's representatives aboard the Harmony of Many. But we require that you serve as interpreter not just of language, but of meaning and intent. Will you accept this responsibility? I will, Zara replied without hesitation. 3 days later, Zara stood in the docking chamber of the Harmony of Many, watching as the human diplomatic vessel UES Endeavor approached. The Veltar city ship was a marvel that defied easy description, a massive organic structure that seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat, surrounded by smaller vessels that moved in complex patterns like fish in a vast cosmic reef. Echo was beside her, its mental voice carrying notes of nervousness and excitement. Many of my people have never seen humans before. They are curious about the small speakers who think in straight lines instead of circles. Zara smiled at the description. The Veltar had a very different approach to problem-solving than humans, one that involved considering multiple possibilities simultaneously rather than following linear logic. It had taken her months to learn to think in their style, and she still struggled with it. The airlock cycled open, and a group of humans in formal diplomatic attire emerged. Zara recognized the lead figure immediately. Ambassador Sarah Martinez, one of Earth's most experienced xenodiplomat. Dr. Chun, Ambassador Martinez said, extending her hand. It's an honor to finally meet you. Your reports have been fascinating reading. Thank you, Ambassador. I'm honored to serve as liaison for this meeting. Zara turned to Echo. Ambassador Martinez, I'd like you to meet my friend, song that echoes between silent stars. They prefer to be called Echo. Echo stepped forward and performed the formal Veltar greeting, lowering its massive head and creating harmonics that resonated through the chamber. Ambassador Martinez, to her credit, showed no sign of fear or discomfort. The honor is mine, Echo. Dr. Chun has told us much about your people's wisdom and kindness. Echo says that they are pleased to meet you and hopes that our peoples can learn much from each other. Zara translated, though she suspected the ambassador's neural implants were already beginning to pick up the basics of Veltar mental communication. The formal meetings that followed were unlike anything in diplomatic history. Instead of sitting at tables and exchanging documents, the discussions took place in large chambers where both species could move freely, with the Veltar using their natural telepathy while the humans relied on advanced translation systems that Zara helped calibrate. The topics covered were vast: trade opportunities, scientific collaboration, cultural exchange, and mutual defense agreements. The Veltar were particularly interested in human music and literature, while the humans were fascinated by Veltar biotechnology and their unique approach to space travel. But the most significant moment came on the third day when one of the younger human diplomats made a comment about studying Veltar technology. The reaction was immediate. Every Veltar in the chamber went silent, their mental harmonies shifting to something that Zara recognized as deep discomfort. Ambassador, Zara said quickly, I need to address something important. She turned to face the assembled diplomats. The Veltar are not subjects to be studied. They are partners to be respected. The word study in this context carries implications of treating them as objects rather than equals. The young diplomat looked confused. Dr. Chun, I simply meant that we'd like to understand their technology better. Understand, Zara replied patiently. But consider how you would feel if an alien species wanted to study human technology. The word choice matters. Instead, we should speak of learning, sharing, collaborating. Ambassador Martinez nodded thoughtfully. Dr. Chun is right. Language shapes perception, and perception shapes relationship. We're here to build partnerships, not to extract knowledge. The tension in the chamber eased, and the Veltar mental harmonies shifted back to their warm, welcoming tones. Later, as the formal sessions concluded, Echo approached Zara privately. Bridge builder friend, you have done well. The speakers for many are pleased with how you helped your people understand wisdom of respect. I learned from you, Echo. You taught me that intelligence comes in many forms, and all of them deserve respect. Echo's 6 eyes seemed to glow with affection. You have taught us something as well, Zara friend. You have shown that among the small speakers who think in lines, there are some who can learn to think in circles when needed. This gives hope for true friendship between our peoples. As Zara looked out at the human and Veltar delegates working together, sharing knowledge, and building connections, she felt a deep sense of satisfaction. 6 months ago, she had been just another researcher on a remote station, dismissed by her colleagues as too emotional, too attached. Now she was something unprecedented, the first human to truly understand an alien species, and the first to help that species understand humanity in return. The scared, lonely creature that had been handed to her as an impossible case had become her greatest teacher and closest friend. Echo had taught her that sometimes the most important scientific discoveries came not from cold analysis, but from compassion and connection. And together, they had built a bridge between two species that might have been enemies, turning them into allies instead. The universe was vast and full of wonders, and Zara knew that this was just the beginning of humanity's journey into that larger community of intelligence. But whatever challenges lay ahead, she was confident that the lessons she had learned from Echo, patience, empathy, and the willingness to see consciousness in unexpected forms would serve both species well. As she watched her two peoples working together, Zara smiled. The unexpected had indeed taken place, and the universe was a better place for it.